The GAA Hour with Colin Parkinson is brought to you by Paddy Power, home of the Money Back Special.
And when I started running, I suppose I didn't stop, and when I got the chance to go, I said I should go, and so I opened up.
We're only the small little fish out there, so we are, and we're trying hard to make it through. But it's hard to get the breaks when you're the smaller fish.
Because I love this county so much, you know, and it's just, I'm delighted that the lads did it for the people who over today, because like I'm heartbroken.
Alright, welcome along to the GAA Hour. We're bringing you a special episode here on Friday because we have a special guest in the studio, Director General of the GAA, Tom Ryan. Mr. Ryan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks,
it took me about a year to track you down.
So make good use of it now, so we'll make up for lost time.
And we're not going to talk about Carlow GAA because it's going too well.
Mind, we can get onto that in a bit, I wouldn't mind.
Okay, so we'll start off with the annual accounts, Tom, because the big headline coming out of them, and I'm sure it's very concerning, is like the gate receipts. We knew this was coming because we could see it with our eyes. You know, the attendances are down. The Galway-Dublin game was really disappointing. So they're down 23% from 16.4 million to 12.7. It's a massive drop in a year. Yeah,
it's disappointing. There's no point in saying otherwise. I always used to say, like before when I was doing my previous role in there, I always used to say, like, you wouldn't really measure, and you shouldn't measure a good GAA year in terms of number of euros coming in. So there were a few years when things were really growing in terms of attendances. I think this is the first year we've dipped after, I think, 2 or 3 successive increases. And when you're talking about increases, you'd never crow about, you know, being a fantastic year. So by the same token, when things are down, it doesn't turn it into a crisis by any means, but there's no point in saying other than it's disappointing.
Yeah, because your commercial income is up, so I think you're breaking even maybe a bit on last year, but at the same time, like
the gates are more important though.
Yeah,
to be honest, like,
what do you put the decrease down to then?
Well, the first thing, like when we were talking about the new quarter-final format kind of this time last year and talking about its introduction, we were putting together the budget for the year and the plan for the year, and the kind of narrative at the time was it's going to be a bonanza and it's a windfall, and I kind of knew it wasn't going to be, really, for a couple of reasons. First of all, but even yourself, but
Pádraig Duffy promised clubs all the extra money, so you would have thought there would have been more as well, no?
I thought there'd be more, or I thought we'd break even maybe the first year. The limiting factors, I suppose, would be the fact that those games were going to be outside Croke Park in the first instance, but more so that, I'm sure, I don't know if you found it, but I certainly found it over the summer, you didn't even have time to get to all the games that you wanted to go to, because it was really just rat-a-tat-tat week after week after week. So by the time people got to the quarter-final stage, they'd already been at plenty of games. Those games came thick and fast, and just from a purely personal point of view, like, you know, the first week of it, the first set of games, felt a little bit
terrible start to it.
It didn't really feel like it had the cut and thrust of the championship. For the third week it got going all right, but excuse me, it took people a little while to get used to, I suppose.
Yeah.
Also,
I think the All-Ireland semi-final coming the week after the Super 8 was too.
It's tight. Yeah.
People weren't ready for a semi-final at that stage, I'd say.
Also, like,
but
you know,
is that
the way
going to be the
hoping,
same this year?
Well, the championship will be a little bit stretched out, but we will have the same broad structure. What's changing at the quarter-final stage is the sequence of the games in terms of the venues and things like that was another thing that people had a few misgivings about. Also, you would have hoped, you know, you'd always be hoping, championship-wise, that you get a new team coming through. And you remember Sligo had a great run a few years for Fermanagh. Lots of teams would have got to the latter stages, and it freshens up the thing. And you would have been hoping Roscommon would have been that team too, but it's more difficult, I suppose, for a team to bridge up to the next when they've got to do it 3 times at that stage, and they found it a little bit tricky.
They found it, yeah. Kildare held their own in it, I suppose. They weren't too bad, and they were new, but they're not as well supported as they used to be either.
Kildare, used to be a mainstay of things, and Meath used to be too. I suppose maybe that's just to do with the little bit of disparity in Leinster-wise. But in terms of how the year fared, like, and you talk about commercial, like, the attendances are more important for the reason that, and even apart from the value of the attendance, just the physical number of people going to matches is important, because that's the measure of the popularity of the thing, really. So quite apart from how much money it might bring in, all the commercial stuff and all the broadcasting, that kind of depends upon it being a vibrant championship. Now, at the same time, I'm very wary of talking things down too. Like, I mean, there was plenty of good football played, and I'm really that happy with the idea that, you know, football is in a crisis and it needs radical action to change and so on, but you would have been familiar with some of that stuff going on over the last few months in terms of the rules and so on. There was a little bit of a it was a little bit of a downer on football over the course of the summer, which I thought was a little bit unfair in some cases. You know, it was a good championship. It was a good championship.
It was okay. I wouldn't go so far. Like, I mean, the big elephant in the room here is Dublin are hammering everybody, right? So the Leinster Championship is a waste of time. Like,
do you think so?
Well, Dublin are going for 10 in a row. They've won 13 of the last 14 or 20. So what's the point of Leinster? So the Leinster Championship 10 years ago, Dublin played Laois in 2007. It was a full house. It was 40,000 last year. Dublin dominance is turning people off, right? And I think that's very obvious, because once Mayo were out this year, people knew no one's going to really challenge them, and that was the reality. Now they're going for 5 in a row. Question I would have for you is there any sort of a strategy in place for if Dublin go 10 in a row? Like, how are we going to put... There's not.
No, not really.
Because their games development money went up in 2018 according to the accounts. So I thought you had said that you were going to redress that a little bit.
Yeah, we did look at redressing it, but the way we were going to redress it and the way we did was to look at the funds going to other counties. To be fair about it, there's maybe a small little bit of a misconception about what that money does or where it goes. That money is going predominantly to clubs and to... Do you know the concept of the club coaches and the GPOs?
Yes. So every club in Dublin has a games development office.
Yeah, or some of them it's shared depending on their own their means.
But other counties don't have that now, right? So that's the starting point.
It's increasing. So there are a few extra counties that have been added to that mix over the course of the last 12 months. Meath, Kildare, Wicklow, Louth, Wexford. There's one or two others. But like what those coaches are doing doesn't really have doesn't at all have a direct relevance to the senior inter-county panel.
No, it does, Tom. No, but that's misleading, because if Dublin don't have to spend all the money they make like 1.7 million in commercial deals, it dwarfs any other county. So because you give a huge amount of games development, they don't have to spend their money on games development. That money is spent on their teams, and like, I mean, they can have really sophisticated backroom teams, and like, I mean, like the money that goes to the clubs, which is absolutely disproportionate. Now I understand if you go by head of population, right, Dublin's doesn't look that much, and by all means you'd feel bad about saying, right, you don't want these games you want these games development officers into the schools aggressively challenging rugby and soccer, but they're spending half their time at the clubs and they're helping the clubs as well. Now per club, if you're looking at per registered member, Dublin are getting something like €274 per registered player. Tyrone, Mayo and Kerry are getting 21, 22 and 19. That's between 2010 and 2014. That hasn't changed. That is... How can you stand over that?
Well, again, it comes back to what those people are doing, and the predominance of their role is to go, as you say, go into primary schools.
But that's only half the role. Like, I don't want to talk about that, because I would say that's really good, right? Because the GAA has to be,
and that's what.
It's the club. It's the club thing. It's the club. It's the other half of their work at the club, where they're organising children's competitions, doing it. Clubs in the other counties don't have someone organising that full time. They've amateurs. Like, I get texts in Portlaoise, can you help out here? Just a volunteer doing it. Dublin have professional games development officers in every club organising that, and other counties don't. I just can't understand how you can stand over them getting that 274 per registered player, Tyrone at 21. That disparity is outrageous.
But actually, Colin, most of their time is not actually spent on registered players. You could actually flip that around and talk about a proportion relative to the general population that don't ever even see their way into a GAA club.
Yeah, no, I'm splitting them out, right? So I've no problem with that.
You're saying half their time in a club.
How is their time? Because I was told that their time during the week is split between the schools and split between the club. So what split is that then? If it's not 50-50, what is the split?
It'll vary club by club, and it'll vary person by person. And I'm not going to mislead you and say that they don't do stuff in the club, but the stuff that they're doing in the club is aimed at 8 to 12-year-old children. They're not, you know.
No, and I understand that. But they're club members at that stage.
Yeah, but most of the people that an officer in Dublin will encounter in his working week are not even just boys and girls from the ages of 8 to 12 going into schools, teaching them the rudiments of Gaelic games. He's not saying, are you a member of Portlaoise and you're not, so I'll only talk to the kids that are members.
But I want to make that clear that
it's even benefiting, you know, camogie ladies football.
Yeah.
It's almost kind of pseudo PE by proxy.
Yeah.
It's not, and it's not terribly sophisticated, but it's terribly important.
Colin Begley did it for Parnell, so I know exactly. And he had to go into schools in the Coolock area, which is predominantly soccer. And absolutely, that's a great thing. So if these games development officers were 100% of their time doing that, I don't think I wouldn't have an argument, because the Dublin population's massive. You need way more. The issue I have is the time they spend in the clubs, and the clubs pay half their wages. So they have that. And again, I'll remind you, 274 per registered player. Forget about the non-registered players. I agree with that. That's a brilliant thing. And Tyrone 21, Mayo 22, Kerry 19. And the problem I have with this is, like you said, a bit of rebalancing. You said last year, and we did adjust Dublin a little bit, you said. And then you look at the accounts this year, and the actual games development has gone up to Dublin.
But it has also gone up to a number of other counties, substantially gone up.
But what the other counties actually need is they need double what Dublin are getting to redress the balance. Like filtering a little bit more money into these counties. Like we're talking 10 Leinsters in a row. The Leinster final is 40,000. Like it's just gone so far that I would be expecting, with the money that's in Dublin, their staff wages in 2016 were 500,000. Like, we're not comparing like with like here. They've a full-time CEO. They've a structure like that. This is just ruining the championship. And my prediction is in 10 more years, Dublin will have won 8 of them, 7 or 8 of them, and the All-Ireland final attendance could be 40,000 like Leinster. Like, are you looking ahead at potential damage that this is causing?
Well, I wouldn't be comfortable at all with the idea. Like, what we would be doing if we were to reduce that money, Wooly, would be to be taking money out of GAA clubs, and that kind of runs contrary to the very thing that we're supposed to be actually doing.
But why can't they use some of their 1.7 commercial money for that? Well, like, they're awash with money. They have a marketing department, Tom. They have a full-time CEO. They have 500,000 wages. No other county can compete with that. Why can't they scale that down a bit and use that money for games development, and you use your money for the other counties to catch up on them?
Well, that is the process that we started a couple of years ago.
But that's not started if you've increased it in 2018.
Well, it actually came down in previous years too. It came down moderately. No, but I'm not querying your figures, or I'm not contradicting your logic. A lot of what you say has merit in it, but at the same time, what it is, when you come back to the bones of what it is funding going into GAA clubs. It's not going to the county board. It's not going to
indirectly
Jim Gavin.
It is, because they're not spending their money on that. You're saving them that expense.
Well, to be fair about it, none of the other counties that you mentioned are spending anything at all, or the clubs in those counties aren't spending anything at all. So Dublin is the only county actually where the clubs have to actually subvent that themselves, and that has been the limiting thing in terms of rolling it out to other counties. So the 5 or 6 other ones that I mentioned to you, and there's a new scheme in Belfast, for example, on a similar theme, they're funded entirely by ourselves. There's no local element of the funding at all, and that's a limiting thing. So Dublin are actually the only county where the clubs are substantially paying for that themselves.
Paying for some of it.
And the other little thing to bear in mind
too,
is
okay.
Sorry, don't mean to
go on now, go on.
Yeah, the other little thing, like when you look at where the income is generated in the round, in the totality where it comes from, like Dublin is a significant funder of the association as a whole. So a lot of the funds that are going to all of the other counties, they're actually...
but that's just a geographical, anomaly, and that's not... But it's almost like you've got the golden handcuffs on with Dublin. They have you over a barrel because they're so well supported, and they almost do fund the GAA in a lot of ways.
There's no getting away from that, like, to be honest. So, and it's an important thing to say that, actually when people talk about all of the money that Dublin they get a substantial amount under the category that you're talking about. There's all manner of other things that other counties do better out of than Dublin, when you talk about capital and you talk about pitches and things like that. And also when you look at who contributes into the thing, like really all it is a kind of a very basic, simple kind of a collective thing. And the only money we have is the money that comes in through the things you started talking about at the start, the commercial income or the gates. And the only thing we are charged with doing with it is putting it back into Gaelic games. So if you look at who is a net kind of contributor to that little mix over time, there's 2 or 3 counties that all the time are funding everybody else, because unfortunately the nature of it is that there's an awful lot of counties that...
That's just population, though. I don't think you should be looking at that as regards, will they raise the most money, so we're going to look after them better. I don't think that's not how the GAA is supposed to work.
I don't mean it in that context. I mean it in the context of that there isn't the extent of the perceived inequity that people might think. That it's not, Dublin are not sucking everything out of the thing. Dublin are,
They use the National Stadium as their home ground. Like, I mean, they get more games development per registered player. They dwarf everybody else. They've won 13 of the last 14 Leinster titles. They're going for 5 in a row. Like, genuinely, if I don't know how you haven't thought about what the potential damage could be if they win 10 Senior All-Irelands in a row. You haven't thought that far ahead, because you are accused sometimes of not having long-term strategies in place for things. So you haven't thought about the eventuality of that happening.
It would be a controversial and a dangerous strategy to outline to you here in terms of what we're going to do to stop a particular county from winning a particular. It poses.
It would be a disaster,
because
because like if you look at the attendances of Leinster, that's a disaster now. Really, you know, they've gone through the floor.
I wonder
the attendances.
How much of that, like, would you say is down to, clearly Dublin have improved and Dublin are playing at a level that is unprecedented, but the next level of counties down below, your own included, they seem to have slipped away a bit. So, you know, there's an imperative on the Meads and the Laoishes and the Kildares and Offaly's as well to kind of step up to that. So
well, here's my theory
that gap has opened up in two ways.
The game has moved into a professional era, right? So county boards now are like mini football clubs in their own right. They're little businesses. They have to worry about their brands, their marketing, fundraising. They're businesses. They've got amateurs running them. People with no business background would just get voted in through politics, GAA politics, right? So Dublin's structure, they have that same politics. They have a chairman voted in, but he doesn't run the business side. They have a CEO to do that. No other county can afford that CEO. I'm just wondering what your thoughts on this are. That if the GAA put a CEO in every 32 county and use the structure Dublin have with business background that has a proven record of running businesses, because that's what county boards are now. We're not in the dark ages of this being just land there and it all, look, see what we did last year and just continued on, which there is a culture of. It would cost, say, 100 grand a year. Would that be a going rate? I'm not sure. In and around that, it would be 3.2 million at a cost to the GAA. I was reading in 2017 you had to pay 15 million to actually...
There's a few of them already.
Right, but if you were to fund them, right, because a lot of counties can't afford them. If you were to fund them...
There's about 20 of them already, Colin.
20 full-time CEOs running county boards?
Yeah, there is, yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, there is, yeah. Now, when you talk about business backgrounds and so on, you know, I can't attest to that, but there's about 20 full-time, whether they're designated as
they're
CEOs
like county secretaries. That's different. That's different, because I know county secretaries and they don't have a business background at all. They were voted in by the usual politics, and they just happen to be in that job, and that's a paid job. Some of them are.
That's fair, Colin.
Some of them are. They definitely weren't interviewed for that job as regards your business background or your ability to run a business. I don't think that's the criteria that was used.
I'd be the last person to kind of ascribe. There's more and more important aspects to running a county than running it as a business.
But there is a huge business element to it now, is the point I'm making. And I was reading in 2017 that at the end of every year you have to bail out loads of county boards that have gone over too much expenses. I think it was 15 million in 2017.
15 million in terms of
15 million in 2017, different payments to county boards for overruns of costs and stuff like that. Am I right on that figure?
You mightn't be, dig that out again there. I know we'd pay about 10, 12 million to county boards every year, but it's not based on...
All right, sorry, here it is. Sorry, just to quote. Just under 15 million of the total was distributed by the GAA Central Council in 2017 to counties and clubs to underwrite their operating costs and to defray the cost of their participation in various competitions.
Exactly, yeah, but it's not particularly because something went wrong somewhere. That's just what we do. Like, you just pay that out.
This is the point. This is the point I'm making. So if you spent maybe 3.2 million to put in a full-time CEO with a business background and use the Dublin model, you're saving yourselves 12 million there. If they can actually balance those books, run things efficiently, and have a marketing department, and there's
a funny little thing in there though. Like, when you talk about balancing the books and business people running counties and so on, only 2 or 3 counties in 2018 actually ran at a loss. Most of them broke even or better. And I won't quote names, or I won't name who they are, but have a look and see, and you might be
I might be surprised.
You might be surprised at one or two of them. Yeah, you might be.
Quickly.
I'm not really that thrilled about the. I understand the sentiment, and I understand like
that. I find a lot of the other
that's a clinical enough word to use.
Okay, but like for example, you still keep your structure.
Yeah.
Like your chairman, and they do all the fixtures and you're not stepping on there. Look, the Dublin model is there, so like you can actually organise it better and run loads of different departments now, and it's a brand. And if you don't like get your brand in space, you're not going to fundraise, you're not going to get the sponsorship in. Dublin, for example, now I know they're on a different level of regards attraction for sponsors, but like they have something like 16. Like other counties are getting fellas, part-time amateurs on the road to ask the local businessman down the road. There's better ways of doing this, is the point I make, if they had a full-time fella running it.
The way we've tried to do it, look, as I've said, about 20 counties have a full-time person.
That's a secretary now. It's not what I'm talking about.
I know, but about 4 or 5 would have, as well as that, would have a commercial manager, if you like, somebody who's specifically charged with doing the things you're talking about in terms of getting in sponsorship and looking at. And the mistake I think that counties and ourselves maybe in the past would have made, and clubs would make too a little bit, is the sponsorship is not just about asking somebody for something at the start of the year or at the start of 3 years. You've got to kind of look after those people, and you've got to cultivate them and mind them and make sure that the only conversation you're having with them is not about, can I have a cheque please? So 4 or 5 counties have gotten into that over the course of the last couple of years. They are getting help from ourselves, but the way we've kind of gone on up to now is trying to provide that help to people centrally from our marketing department, because you could also argue, come the other way around, like if you have 32 of those around the country, perhaps you're getting into duplication as well, and perhaps you're getting into less than optimum utilisation of resources. And would you be better off putting that money that you're talking about, if we had that discretionary extra money, would you be better off putting that into coaching? I think myself you might be, to tell you the truth.
Once it's not coaching for Dublin, we might agree on that. Come here, just on that with county boards, because you come in for a lot of criticism. It's like Croke Park or the GAA and whatever, right? But the book kind of stops with you, so it's unfortunate for you when a lot of it's not your problems. County boards can't get their fixtures right. A lot of them are out of the championship sufficiently early. Like, so we're all talking about if you change the structure of it or whatever, but enough counties are out early enough to have their competitions run off in a timely manner, and they don't. And I'm just wondering, like the CPA has been set up, and they often complain about the county boards are clearly not doing their job, but there's no accountability. It's like, who do they answer to? They're an autonomous and I tackled Corey Duffy about this. He said, we don't interfere with them, and I'm like, but they're not doing it. Like do you not think that system has to change? Because you're getting the brunt of it.
Yeah, it is a funny little thing, like, and it's an uncomfortable enough kind of seat to be sitting in when you're responsible for something that you don't actually really ultimately control.
So it's like the Minister for Finance is responsible for, the book does
abdicate that at all for a second, but in terms of maybe the degree of absolute control, it's less than you might think. Now, that's not to say it shouldn't be more or it shouldn't be, but it is actually less, because like the focus that we took with this thing last year in terms of the calendar year was to create space and to create opportunities for counties to utilise. In a lot of cases, they did utilise it. In some cases, maybe a bit better than others.
This is another thing, though, Tom. Half of them didn't play any championship. Now, again, where's the accountability for that?
It mightn't just be about championship, though. What's to say? And we didn't say at the outset of it that it had to be championship. Just play matches and just have a regular programme of matches for people and make sure people know when they're and utilise that space in April. Now, I hear what you're saying about the CPA, and we've had plenty of good conversations with the CPA, and I think of an understanding of what it is that they would like to see, and it's not. So
they're invited to the review in 2019.
It's not like the polar opposite of what anybody would like to see, to tell you the truth. It's a regular, predictable, fair programme of matches for people that you can stick it up on your fridge at the start of the year, and you'll have an idea when you're going to be playing. I wouldn't be too down on. You're getting at the April thing there, I think, from last year. Yeah, it was mixed enough. Some counties use it very, very well. Other counties, not so much, to be honest. The one thing that
it was
I would
messy
say is
when the championship starts on the 1st of May. It's a terrible mess.
It's
a
tight.
mess.
It's tight. Yeah,
too tight.
And you'll know about that thing about in terms of trying to restrict the movement of counties and the
training weekends.
Yeah. It was your own county. We were kind of embroiled in that thing. So there's an example where we did try and enforce something and exert a little bit of direct control, and
It doesn't,
patchy
because
enough.
I can see it from their point of view, because the league is so intense. You're just getting recovery done. So where do you get your tactical prep and stuff for the champ? You need to do it in April, you know, and you need to get away to do that.
All these things that you're meant, like there is a little inherent tension with all these things, and balancing the club versus balancing the county, and it is very valid. Like the county teams do need their preparation time, and they do need to hit the ground running when it comes to May time. But you could also argue that, like, in the general sense, even apart from fixtures, the county game is like it's well resourced, and it has a good profile, and it's generally it's in a good place. Like football and hurling, in a good place county wise. The club bit of it needs to be minded and needs to be nurtured, and it needs attention.
Yeah, but like, I mean, I suppose what attention is it getting? Because this new structure, like Brian Cody said, the solution they came up with to help club players is to increase the inter-county games, and he has a point on that, because even the April for clubs, you'll play a match or two, and then you don't have another one till September. So I think it's actually made the situation worse.
Do you? Yeah.
The question I would have is, I know it's up for review in 2019. John Horn has said that. Are the third level education representatives, are they going to be in a meeting? Are the CPA, the GPA and yourselves going to be in a meeting this time? Because that's the problem. We have Kieran Malloy and we have Liam Silk now on the 16th going to play an All-Ireland semi-final on the same day as a Sigerson. That happened last year though, Tom. Like, how can that happen again the following year?
Well, the immediate answer to your question, and not to be evasive though, we haven't worked out what the composition of that little group will be. But sure, it won't work if it doesn't have full representation.
But how would it not have had the last time? Like, how would Pádraig Duffy just decide this himself without saying, does that suit you? Does that suit you? And everybody, like, it seems so logical to me that everyone would have their little kind of input and then come up with something, and then nobody complains. I'll have nothing to complain about.
The funny thing is though, like, all those people, they will all be involved. All the people that you mentioned, because otherwise the process doesn't have a value. Yeah. But the one thing that you can be sure of out of it, nobody will be happy with it, I'd say. You know, I
think once all four of them are happy, I think that's a great starting point.
Even all four of them is going to be really hard, like, because there's all manner of competing interests and all very valid ones. Like, but that's the one thing I'm kind of learning. Like, it's very, very hard. You're trying to skirt and negotiate a kind of a medium ground, and by definition, a medium ground means nobody's getting what they want.
It might be a long meeting. It might be a long meeting.
But I'd say it'll be a few meetings. Actually.
I want to talk to you before, because I'm conscious of the time. I want to talk to you about the broadcasting rights, because this is something I've talked about recently, and it was something I've criticised you on the show about. So I might as well say it to your face. You said when you took over, so there's a new, see, this is again the long-term strategic plan. So broadcast rights were sold for 5 years, and the very next year championship structure changed. So immediately I'm thinking, and here's the criticism, they don't have a long-term strategic plan. You didn't have a long-term strategic plan here at all, did you?
Those two things weren't aligned,
they weren't aligned.
Yeah, what sorry,
so,
specific.
So this because people were starting,
what did I say?
People were starting to ask about the extra game. So we know Monaghan Throne wasn't on television. So you said we're going to stick with the existing structure of things. We're happy with how the arrangement has worked up to now, and we're not looking at changing the nuts and bolts of the arrangement until that comes up for renewal. So you're like saying last year we're happy with, even though this year's completely different. It's almost like that didn't make any sense.
Maybe that was a convoluted or roundabout way of saying there's not going to be any more matches on television. There's an amount that have been contracted for, and that's what we're going to show.
And you couldn't say, right, well that contract is null and void now because it's changed, and we'll sign up a new one based on the new competitions.
Would you want to? I wonder. Like,
the Joe McDonagh Cup had was not televised. Like, that could be sold to TG Cahir, to Virgin, to anyone, just to get it on. And now you have John Horan talking about a tier 2. So how does that tier 2? Because Sky and RTE are going to look for tier 1 matches. So is tier 2 going to be sold to somebody else? Like, I mean, what's the strategy for these new structures?
I think the idea there would be that rather, like, you wouldn't sell it in its own right. Maybe what you want to do is you want to stitch it into an overall agreement that says, look, if you're going to have A, B, C and D, you've got to have E, F. You've got to show E, F and G as well.
Right, but there's a lot of games now. It's hard for example, RTE are under serious pressure on a Sunday night. They're coming in for loads of criticism. They show about 20 matches, and they use 2 hours. But amazingly, when I talked to Declan McBennett, they only have highlights rights for Sunday night. They couldn't even put Monday game on, even if they wanted to.
And they're after moving into the league now.
But why hamstring them on the highlights rights like that? Like, I mean, I think Ayr have them on a Wednesday. I think Sky have them on a few different days, and they don't use them at all, which is incredible.
But coming back to your thing that you were saying, like, would we not go back and change the quantum of what's being shown. I presume you're saying that would we not show more matches? Because do you think that's...
But more of the lower levels.
Not every game. I don't think every game should be on television, to tell you the truth. Even some of the games that are broadcast, I know counties would feel themselves that they might do better if those games weren't shown, particularly at the club end of things. I actually think, Colin, we're close enough to the right number of matches.
Yeah, I'm more talking about Joe McDonough. Even the Monaghan Tyrone one was fair enough. Maybe one or two extra ones, but it was almost
can't
like
show every match, and I don't think you should be trying to show every match, really.
Is,
and I understand that lads that want to see that particular game will be annoyed, but
because Sky and RT went for a lot of the big games later in the year. A lot of the games early in the year weren't shown. The provincial games, so like that. The standout one was the Monaghan Tyrone.
You have a point with Joe McDonough. You have a point with
the
that.
Joe McDonough. So could that be sold as an entity, like the tier 2? So this is changing again now, and we're stuck in a 5-year cycle, and it's like, so what happens to tier 2? How is that going to get voted in if it's not treated with the respect it deserves? And say, put that up for tender. Sky and RT won't want it because they'll want the tier 1.
I think you're right. I can remember, and I'm sure you remember too, like the Tommy Murphy that was there before, and the reason that died on the vine really was because it very quickly got associated in people's minds as like it was second best, and it didn't get the kind of push behind it that could have made it work. But when you look at, like, Joe McDonough was a great competition last year in terms of the standard of hurling. It was, and all the teams were evenly matched. But against that, the crowds at it were small too. So it's not as if, to be fair about it, Wooly, like, it's not as if there's a latent, unsatisfied TV audience out there dying to see these games. You'd have to work at it.
I think there is. I think if you put it on, they'll watch it. Like, I mean, look at the club games. TG Cahir's numbers on a Sunday are through the roof.
Yeah, they're actually very good.
Really strong. And that's club. Yeah. So you're telling me that Carlow Westmeath on a lovely Sunday, Saturday evening, that people sitting down with a cup of tea wouldn't watch that? Yeah. I think they would. I think you're selling it short.
Do you remember that the funny thing about that match was that was on, like, part of the promotional profile element of the Joe McDonough last year was to put that match on with the Leinster hurling final, which I think was a good thing to do, and it meant that there was a crowd in the ground, and it was really, really good. The problem with that was it meant it was up directly against the Munster hurling final at the same time, and that was maybe there are other ways to go about those things to achieve what you're talking. I don't disagree with the sentiment you're expressing, to be honest with you, and I saw a lot of the Joe McDonough Cup matches, and like it would be great if it came to a broader audience.
But is there flexibility to do that within the 5-year deal? To put that out. Say, sure, it's a money making thing, which you're the ex-finance director of the GAA.
To be fair about it, Colin, the little yoke that you're quoting there that I said, I meant that in the context of what I understood that to mean was about there's more quarter final matches in the football specifically, and would that mean we're going to show more? And the answer is no. Like, I actually, rightly, people might disagree, but I think there's enough matches really on television, to tell you the truth. And where it actually does have a little adverse effect sometimes is on club matches in counties, as I've said. And
the problem, like I said, was without any extra games being allowed, the RT and Sky went for the later games, and there was a lack of games and promotion on the TV at the start of the year, which was, the problem. So there should have been flexibility to say, okay, we might add 3 to it, but the broadcast partners have to show early games rather than go mad for the. I can understand why they would want the later games, but there might be flexibility there. But it's the highlights rights. I just can't fathom these highlights rights. Right, they're so restrictive. So, John Horan was talking about RT last Sunday, and he was complimenting their League Sunday, and he said, we got 2 hours promotion of our games. We are the national games and they're the national broadcasters. So they actually were able to change their deal mid 5-year, whatever. So I'm wondering, with these highlights rights, we would love highlights rights. The GAA have them on their own online, so that's kind of cornered off. But here's the thing, if RT wanted to have a Monday night analysis show, they couldn't. If we wanted to have a Monday night online analysis show, we couldn't. Where's the promotion of the game if the highlights rights are so restricted? For last year, for example, RTE and Sky had no magazine show or midweek highlights show.
Yeah, that's a gap, all right. And it's not even about showing matches.
How can you let them away with that? Like, Sky for the Premier League would sicken you with different shows they have on it. They're making this out to be the best league in the world when it's not. And for the GAA, it's almost like, well, they show the games on the Saturday and nothing on during the week. In Championship, people would watch a show every night in the middle of the championship. Yet the highlights rights are so restrictive. So I'm just wondering how
both of those channels have been good partners for us. Like in fairness, and
RTE. But the highlights is the point I'm making, because John specifically said about the promotion of our games, and if there's no promotion of our games all week in our strongest part of the year, how is that a good thing, or how are rights sold on the basis that you're restricted to a Sunday night, so they're hamstrung straight away? Why?
So those are the packages that's the way they were divided up.
Could that be changed? Like, I mean, everyone. For my take on this is everyone should get highlights rights, and like some will be crappy shows, some will be really good shows, but there'll be loads of shows.
You don't want crappy shows.
No, but I mean, I don't. Okay, but for example, if RTE weren't restricted to Sunday night, they could do a show, a Monday night football show, like the soccer, but they can't do that, which finds it's bizarre.
I suppose. Without getting into the specifics of what each channel or company has or not, when somebody's buying something, I suppose they want to be sure that it's theirs and they have the use of it, and that nobody else is going to be able to cross across that, so that they can build their own.
It's not a good deal if that's the case, though, is it?
Do you think so?
Well, it's not a good deal if they're restricted on what they can show, and they've got exclusive, so nobody else can get in there at all. Like Virgin, for example, couldn't use highlights all week. What if they had plans to make a brilliant GAA show?
You can't go out then, Colin, like, you can't go out and sell. I can't sell something to you that I've already sold to Keane there. You know, that's the limitation of it.
Well, if Sky and RT aren't using midweek highlights, why would nobody else be able to use them?
Well, that's in fact how RTE came about their highlights that they're broadcasting at the moment. It was a kind of recalibration between the partners themselves, and we would have tried to oil the wheels of that a little bit to make that happen. So look, you can use influence and you can bring influence to bear, but we're contractually bound in certain circumstances to be honest about it.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Say when the 5 years are up, would you look at the highlights rights in a different manner? Would you, maybe
all these, like there's always, just in every sphere there's things that you can do a bit differently, or you would change tack on. Your point about the championship structure is a good one, like in fairness, and we didn't see coming down the line the way the championship was going to be. Joe McDonagh Cup wasn't even an idea in somebody's head at that point. So like, it is important that we do try and plan ahead and do try and factor those things into the commercial undertakings and the broadcasting undertaking. The funny little thing about that is, do you know the way at the moment where the championship is, it's in the middle of a trial. Like this is year 2 of a 3-year arrangement, and I can't honestly tell you what way it's going to be like in year 4, whether we'll revert back to the way we were or whether we stick with the arrangements that we've been trialling. I suppose the job is to kind of build in a bit of flexibility that says, look, if it goes this way, this is the shape that the deals are going to take, and if it goes another way, this is the shape that they're going to take. We have to take that on board. Like, we have to do that.
From your point of view, would you be happy with the promotion of the GAA during championship during the week?
I think, look, there's always things that can be improved on, and I think the ones that were good, actually, not specifically promoting the championships themselves, but you'll have seen some of the other documentary programmes and things like that were out over the course of time. I really enjoyed those. I thought they were really, really good. You'd like to see more, of course you would, and particularly at a time
you can't, because you've restrictive highlights, right?
But particularly at a time, and I've nothing bad to say about any other sport that they're all, but particularly when you look at maybe September time when the championships were over, and that would have been kind of our preserve a little bit, and there wasn't a whole lot going on in terms of the GAA world and the GAA coverage because of where the All-Ireland finals had moved to. Now, look, there were pluses to that as well, and some of that was tied into our earlier conversation about clubs and club fixtures. And it comes back to my earlier point, like, whatever you do, it has a positive aspect on one side, but there's always a knock-on, whether foreseen or unforeseen, that is perhaps detrimental on the other side. So it's a question of trying to find a balance between all those things,
Right, okay, just the last question now, because I'm conscious of time. While we're on the promotion side of it, and John, when I read John Horan's comment about promotion of our games, it just got me thinking about, obviously, the stuff we've talked about, but also the media bans that are, fashionable amongst county media bans. Say that a lot of counties now have media managers, so you can't directly contact players, which is grand. I've no problem with that. But at media days, they're told they're not allowed to talk about something. That we saw an example of that recently. In general, like these,
that's a real pity. Like, what in your day, like, did that?
No, journalists would ring you and you just talk to them.
And
the thing about that, Tom, is that if you want to talk to them, you talk to them, and if you don't, you say no. So you're treated like an adult. But that seems to be taken off players now, and I don't really know what you can do with that. Like,
it's a real pity. Like, and you'd hear stories. Do you know the way counties would have a kind of an open night before the first championship game? Like, they were a great thing when
that's
they started.
That's all gone. And
funny enough, kind of drifted away because the I'm sure the players would be delighted. I don't really know what happens, why they don't work, but all the players weren't available all the time. Some counties didn't even run them at all.
Yeah, the Super Bowl, for example, will have every single player available in the week of that, and they have it promoted.
I suppose there's a subtle little difference there, like, which is like those lads, their job, like they have to, if they're told to.
Well, that's true, but they're also promoting it, and the bigger picture is if there's more fellas in newspapers, it's pushing Johnny Sexton out of it, and
100%.
So would there be a strategy in place maybe to deal with this and have county boards direct managers that this stuff has to end, that it's not doing anybody any harm? If a player doesn't want to do it, they're more than entitled not to do it, and have some directive. You're getting all this games development money from us, so either this is a directive to your county manager that this stops, or else your games development money will stop, and like that would put a stop to it pretty quickly, and then we'd have more players in papers, we'd have more players on radio shows, we'd have much more promotion of the games, and we can push the soccer and the rugby out of it, completely during the summer.
It is a real gap, like it is, and it's it's availability of players in every county are what makes kids want to play football and play hurling. More than a county board official, more than myself, more than it's players that actually make the difference.
I think
they're the main promotional.
I was reading lately that the Derry hurlers were on a media ban. Did you see that? No, I tweeted that out recently. The Derry hurlers now, like, I mean, it's the fashionable thing. It's kind of like Jim Gavin runs a tight ship, and I understand why he runs a tight ship, because sometimes like the media can go to town in Dublin.
I suppose,
historically,
like there have been instances like going back over the years where players, one name you'd remember them, maybe said things coming up to matches about opponents and things like that. There was one or two little things, wasn't there? And I suppose maybe that's what people are guarded against. But like you said, like anytime you meet a player, you're talking, they're smart people. They're intelligent, articulate, and they should be. I don't want to use the word advertisement because that sounds, you're not commoditizing people or anything like that. But they're the best ambassadors for the thing, and it is a real shame. And
would you think of giving? Oh, it's a good idea. Okay, so I was going to say, would you think of doing it? But like, it would be very easy to fix it. Like, I mean,
like, would you do it more like the way we've gone about it before was more providing practical help, providing a kind of a template for those evenings and tools and helping PROs and all that kind of stuff, rather than the slap on the wrist approach that you're advocating.
It's not really the county board that does it. The county board might be happy. It's the county manager that has the power to do it. Like, I mean, that's probably the issue. Finally, before I let you go, like, I mean, John Horan is bringing in the Tier 2. Everybody has a little thing that they might change. Pádraig Duffy brought in the Super 8s thing. What do you want to change, and what do you want to do to be remembered for when as Director General?
I think the leagues, actually, to my mind, the league is the best competition that we have. And if you're talking about a shape and a structure to the year, I think the league structures and bigging up the league and making the league a more central part of the GAA year and the GAA calendar, I think.
Well, that's one of my restructures. So you've said the right thing. Yeah, if the league becomes the championship, bring it forward, like, into the good weather. And then have that as the All Ireland.
Isn't it funny? Like I'd say your chances.
Tell the truth. You listen to the podcast.
Your chances and mine of achieving that are practically nil. I'd say yours are greater than mine. But it's funny, like the in most games and most sports, the league is the predominant thing, and the knockout element of it is kind of secondary. In our case, it's the other way around, and you can see why that is. And to be honest with you, that's always going to be the way it is. So I don't think we'll get to the stage of replacing them, but I think the league needs and deserves and merits an awful lot more attention and status. I think it's fantastic competition.
Yeah, and just a knock off on that, when every team plays each other at a similar level,
absolutely,
we might see less of the defensive football, because you can actually attack each other. Like, I understand defensive football when a small team plays a big team. You don't have to be
as risk averse.
You don't have to. You're
not limiting your losses.
You can take them on. Yeah. So hopefully that will be. So move the league into the summer, and we have our All Ireland.
You're putting words in my mouth, but no better man.
Tom, thanks very much for dropping in.
Not at all, William.